Today it's my pleasure and honor to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Eleanor Merritt. Today she's going to be sharing something very special with us, a real gift from my perspective. It's going to be her memories connected to the works of art surrounding us here in this gallery, created by the artist and her mother, Eleanor Merritt. It's a real honor for that. I won't steal any of the thunder about Eleanor Merritt from Lisa, but I would like to say about Lisa, she has many roles here in the Sarasota community, and I won't go through all of them, but I want to highlight some really important ones for us here today. Lisa, of course, is a board member of our board of directors, and she's a leader, a true leader, and the chair of our community engagement committee for our board of directors. And she's very active, and she keeps us all very active and engaged in what we're doing here at the museum. And today is a prime example of that. She's also, of course, a doctor and the founder of her own nonprofit, the Multicultural Health Institute. And she's also a member trustee of a very important organization called the Black Trustees Alliance of Art Museums. And these are trustees who are on boards of art museums throughout the country that are very intentional and purposeful in their work to keep art museums thinking forward and keeping us on our toes and thinking about the issues of the world. But despite all of those roles, today she's really here more as the daughter of Eleanor Merritt, and it's a pleasure for me to welcome you. Thank you for sharing your time today.
Thank you, Jay. I also want to thank Jay, as we were just talking, was so excited with the recent announcement by the museum of the establishment of the Eleanor Merritt Fellowship, which is going to help one of those goals that we all have, increasing the pipeline of future arts leaders. And his mom is also an educator as well as an arts advocate. And I think this is going to be a wonderful next level to really have her memorialized in this way, that is helping to bring the next generation along and have that generation be part of this whole bridge and advocacy that she stood for.
Absolutely.
I want to thank the museum, and I also want to thank the generosity of lenders such as Bill and Meredith Hilton Morgan and the Shuffle Stewart Art Collection for their donation of their pieces to be included on display today. I'd also like to thank a variety of organizations, the Sarasota County Tourist Development Tax Board, the, I'm so sorry, but I don't have all my glasses to show this. The Ringling Endowment and the Gulf Coast Community Foundation for their support of this, as well as the Art of Our Time program. So without further ado, I'm happy to begin. Who would like to share on the journey of my mom? And I also want to, of course, welcome you all here. I see dear friends, I see family. My sister is in attendance with her partner, Michael White. I'm so glad that everybody is here to recognize part of this theme, remembrance. And so I think it's always interesting that we get a chance to start at the beginning and the end. So if you start here with this painting, you would be surprised to know that this piece is 72 years old. And this is something that we discovered as we went through this incredible storage space that she had, carefully curated all of her work, some of it even from high school. This is a piece that was done in 1950 when my mother was 17 years old. Just take that in for a minute. And we believe that this was probably done as part of her portfolio for application to Brooklyn College, where she matriculated in 1951. So she, interestingly in this piece, chose a male figure, which was very rare subsequently. She tended to tend towards female figures, but you'll see certain things like this, the large hands, the eyes. There's a way that she had of creating these penetrating gazes, and also the blue palette. This is something that she would use frequently. And as she went into Brooklyn College and she had her skills cultivated through instructors like Mark Rothko and Kurt Sullivan, the whole abstractionist movement, she became more comfortable with this fluidity. So even as a youngster, in a sense, she was already expanding out, not just drawing a picture of a person sitting there. She has scrolls, she has shapes and things like that. And then if you come here to the last painting that she did in 2018, you see where it expanded all the way to a much more abstract depiction, and her use of mixed media, which became a favorite mechanism to convey the image. If you can come in closer, it's okay to come in closer. You'll see that in the creation of the shape of the form, that these blue lines, perhaps it's not pieces of fabric that she cut out in a certain way to give that shape. That this white, sprinkly, textural element is actually different layered papers, and some of it she paints in to accentuate. And I like to think of this linear thing as almost like a magic wand. You see that with like kind of this white magical thing, and she's talking about this painting in one of the videos that we found, and it's about raising the arms to the heaven and just being joyful in this relationship between these two individuals. But again, she was very generous with her renditions of the female form, and very liquid in a way in terms of how she would create the image. And so the beginning and the end. So I could end here, but I'm not going to. There's a lot more to the story, right? So if we come here to this painting here, this is called Just Breathe. It was done in the mid-2000s, 2014. And when you look at that picture, how does that make you feel when you see that? You see this figure here, you see her mouth is like doing something called pursed lip breathing in a sense. You see there's another figure looking this way. And then there's another figure looking this way. It's almost like, you ever look in a mirror and you see a person and then see another person, right? So it's her way of looking at what she was going through at that time, because many people who know her, she was fighting lung cancer. I diagnosed my mother with lung cancer in the end of 2005. And it was an amazing journey. And at this point in time, she was struggling with the treatment. But what was so amazing about that diagnosis was it was freeing for her, because she then began to expand into a variety of experimental techniques, because she was painting like she didn't know if she had tomorrow. And this painting, she decided to take on her fear, her uncertainty, and also her curiosity of what was it like. You see the red and the blue, like oxygenated and deoxygenated, but what was happening in her body, and how did that inform her own perception of herself and other people's perception of her, etc. It's a really powerful piece. There's another one that I believe Cornell Maxwell has, that one called Looking Out, Looking In. And she made with this palm frond over the top of the person's head. She's kind of sitting in a window. And again, it's the same concept of the introspective view of what's happening inside of her body, what is she visualizing, and then the external view of what people see. For most of the time, in many years, people had no idea that my mother was laboring under this diagnosis. And she was incredible in compartmentalizing and using her artistic vision to visualize herself well, literally. And her physician came to our opening the other night, and we were joyful again, because she many times has told me that my mother was such a miracle, as she presented with metastatic lung cancer, which normally has a less than 5-year survival rate. And she went for over a dozen years and produced some of her most incredible work during that time. Similar work to this, Remembrance. And again, this is our signature piece. You guys remember this. And again, it's the very loosely defined forms. This one is more colorful, different angles of the heads and the figures. And it was always this kind of interplay. She became more introspective of the spiritual aspects of life and the ancestors and African and indigenous influences. There's almost like this totem quality to the work as well. And not forgetting where you come from. That was always an important theme for her that she put into us, that we have to always remember who preceded us, who gives us our strength, while we're also looking forward to who's coming next and thinking about the future generations. So this is a really powerful piece. I'm really pleased that Steve chose this as a signature piece. And this is also one of the pieces that's going into the permanent collection at the Ringling, which we are very, very excited about that. How about this one? You guys like this one, right? This Metamorphosis. It's a very, I call it a very gushy painting. But again, this is mixed media. And if you see it, it's not all painting. This is fabric. And then these are these special cloths and papers, some of which I brought back from Asia and some of which she collected in her many travels. And again, if you look at this form, Different people see different things, and that was one of my mother's guys, is that she liked for people to see and feel what they wanted to see and feel from a painting. She wasn't always painting from her message, she was painting from what it might do for you and help you to feel. So different people see a womb-like experience, they see embryos. Somebody else told me they thought it looked like kidneys. And it brings up all different kinds of images, but it's the whole idea of change and transformation. Is this a broken heart? Is this two faces looking at each other? The thing about my mother's work is you can look at it many, many different times, and every time when you look at it anew, you might see something different. And those of you like Alan, who have her work, I'm sure you find that experience sometimes. When you get to look at it, you see, oh, I didn't see that before. Okay, this next piece is called Marsh Dance, which was done in 2002. And this is a different kind of a palette. She tended to work in different groupings of colors. So this was kind of her green and yellow palette, but she had a whole series that she did with that, when she get on these trips with that. And again, this is a kind of very fluid. You see the water flowing. You see these little feet of something flying away, and these little things now, is this beings coming up, or these tadpoles? Who really knows? But it does, what's nice about her work in this case, where you can see these lines, it's showing how she was able to put movement in two-dimensional work. Like you can almost hear the frogs singing and the splashing of the birds jumping around and stuff when you look at this painting, right? And that's a really nice piece. And Steve and I had a really hard time trying to figure out where to put him when we were organizing the work. And then finally I was like, why don't we just stick it in the middle, because then you see it from the hall, because it has its own distinct style and color, and it ended up being exactly where it needed to be. So we're pleased with that. Now here's another really favorite, amazing piece with an amazing story. Blue Lady, Blue Dreams. Done way back in 1983 when shortly after she first came here. It's a very Art Deco, very powerful piece. And again, she kind of does this hint of the face, and if you get closer in this one, you see those eyes. And in some ways, these are the same eyes as that first piece that she did there. It's a very penetrating, mysterious, yet reserved gaze. What's so important about this work, it is part of the story of the inspiration. Not only was it an inspiring story that she is a person that had a very hard diagnosis and overcame it, but it's also a story about a woman, a black woman, who just labored often in obscurity to some degree, just doing her work, not knowing if it was ever really going to be fully recognized or appreciated. Because when she first did this piece and showed it down here in Sarasota, they hung it in the back of the gallery next to the bathroom. Nancy, I think you remember that. Which my mom was like, oh, well, I guess they didn't like it, because back then it was seashells and sunsets and palm trees and, nice paintings. And here you got Blue Lady, right? All fierce and powerful. And so she got hidden. I didn't even see this painting for many, many years. And then in 2013, when we were planning the Revelation of Goddesses series in Houston at the Houston Museum of African American Culture, we were going through different work. And then she's like, well, maybe I'll show this one. And this is how she was so matter of fact. And I was like, wow, that's an amazing piece. Where has that been? And we brought her out, and that became the signature piece. It took 30 years for this painting to actually be recognized. Just imagine that. And it's always a favorite. This was also in the Spectrum exhibit at the Ringling College in 2019 that they did alongside a number of other masters. This piece, Big Mama, again, in 1980, this is part of this whole womanist period. Many of you remember Alice Walker and the whole theme on womanism, which really was embracing the strong female archetype. And it was a little different from feminism at that time, because for black women, they've already had to be strong and were treated in some ways from a gender role activity equivalently, but they still weren't benefiting from the same social economic benefits that white women were going for. So my mom, again, she loved to do these very full, fertile, strong, and then again, you see this kind of only hints of the wings, these arcs of energy that are similar that you see again in Angel of Mercy and some of the other work that she's done. So Big Mama, which was created after several studies. You see, in this earlier time frame, she was much more tight and linear and realistic in her depictions, and she'd work sketches from her training Sometimes she'd do I found like 20, 30 pencil charcoal drawings until she got it how she wanted it. And then she'd paint it. And that was very, very, a different kind of technique. And then, in 2007, we see her self-portrait. And what's very different about this, when she did this painting, I knew we were going to have a lot more time. That she had decided in her mind she was going to deal with this. And she was feeling strong. She believed a lot in traditional Chinese medicine and the lines of energy and the forms and things like that. So I am going to stop periodically and ask if there's any questions. So as we've completed this wall, are there any questions or any comments that anyone would like to make?
How many pieces would your mom be working on simultaneously?
In fact, we're going to show that in the video. Sometimes she would be working on 2 or 3 or even more pieces at a time. She was incredibly prolific. And she would sometimes put something away if it wasn't coming the way she wanted it. She'd just put it to the side, sometimes for a really long time. Sometimes she'd work all the way through, and then if she didn't like a piece, she'd paint it over. And that was pretty amazing. In fact, we have one piece that Amara has that she may rework, I don't know, that she just, it was a big one too. She had done a lot of work on it, and she just never liked it, and she just painted the whole center of it over, and you could tell she was planning to redo that part. Sometimes she would cut up old paintings she didn't like and use them in other paintings. But she was, and sometimes she just worked really hard on one thing because it required so much precision, and it's a really, they have measured the mental effort of artists when they're creating, and it's on the same level as neurosurgeons doing like brain surgery. It's total focus. And so that's one thing growing up as children of an artist. We knew if mommy was in the studio, if mom was working, you better go make your own dinner. You better go, do whatever you're doing. And speaking of children growing up, this is another favorite here, mothers and daughters. So that's my sister Lori here, and that's me there, and that's mom in the center. And this was an archetype, the sense of the three. It was the 3 of us. We were very close, and she loved us dearly. And you see the embrace. But what's interesting about this painting, and again, something I just noticed as it hung up here this time, after all these years of it being in the living room, etc., was you see how she's embracing us, but at the same time, she's kind of pushing with this hand. You see? There's emotion there. So there's that duality. But the lines of the energy, it was almost like she was seeing auras when she would paint, and she would work that into the image. And this was also part of the phase where she was making that transition in the 70s from oil painting, very traditional, conventional approaches, to acrylics, which dried faster and allowed different kinds of depth of color and things like that. And she really worked with acrylics most of the career after discovering that, but then she would combine that with inks, collage, other techniques as she came along. And this one here is called Morning. This was in the late 80s, and it was part of a series that she started doing. She was very touched and used her art as well for social commentary. And what was going on in South Africa was really painful to her soul. She was thinking about what was happening to the women over there and all of what was going on. And so she did this because she knew the people over there were fighting for their freedom, and she thought about the women mourning, nobody coming home, all of the people going off into the spirit land. And this was done with Conte crayon, so it's a very soft, and you can see the texture of the paper. And she goes back to some of those original Brooklyn College roots in terms of her technique and things like that. It's a beautiful painting. And there were more in that series, and in fact, she ended up doing one. It was a collage on the day that everybody was able to vote in South Africa, and they were lined up in the whole long lines. And that was donated to the Family Life Museum up at the State College of Florida. And that's now in that collection up there as well. Okay, this is Efwa's father. There were 2 Efwa's fathers in the collection that are both. She had a thing of naming the same name to paintings, which was driving the archivist. Well, so just name it 1 and then 2, But we have family in Ghana. And my parents went to Ghana in the early 70s, which is pretty amazing for that time. And Efwa was the wife of my Uncle Kofi, and this was my mother's depiction of her father, who was a chief. And the original picture was him in his robes in burlap with these incredible lines of energy. He was obviously a very powerful man. In this one, this is again mixed media. So the image is created mostly by these elements that she then painted in to develop further. So these are those papers that she then painted in different colors. This circular stuff is a fabric, and then she carried the pattern further along. This white border of the gown is again cutouts that she used. These are fabric for the headdress. And this down the middle, this brown linear stuff, is something called tapa cloth. It's from Polynesia, she brought back. And then she loved this tapa cloth. And tapa cloth is something that's created by pounding the bark of the mulberry tree. I think it is a soft bark on the inside. And for a long time, it was the only source of cloth in the South Pacific before they had, quote, Western contact. And it's used in many traditional ceremonies. It's used to wrap things carefully. It's got sacred connotations. And I think that spoke to my mom and why she began to use it, because again, she's still dealing with her own process and understanding. And so she really wanted to imbue this with a sense of dignity and significance. And I'm happy that this also is another piece that's going to be going into the permanent collection at the Ringling. So, yeah, Efwa's father. Okay, in the garden, 1990. I'm gonna do these two together, kind of. This carrying firewood in 2008 and in the garden. If you compare these two images, this is very feminine. Again, she's using the tapa cloth to create the arm, the face. These are cutouts, okay? This is all collage mixed with the painting. Again, the layers and the layers to create the image of this beautiful goddess-like woman in the garden. This is the painting that was loaned to us by Dr. and Hope Morgan, who were our neighbors, and he was actually the former chief of staff, I think, at the hospital. And they loved this, and they loved gardening, and they loved Mom, and so they were happy to have this. And if you compare this one with woman carrying firewood, you'll see this is a strong woman. If you see in the third world in Africa and the Caribbean and all of that, there's women carrying big things of pots and firewood, and often with babies on their back. This really struck my mom and her association with powerful women, starting with her own mom. And so she gives this woman a lot of strength. She's kind of striding. You see this, it's like almost pulse waves of energy going forward. Like she is going somewhere with this wood, don't get in her way, she's going to get it taken care of. Again, there's a head wrap that's made with fabric here, and fabric here, which was, I believe, repurposed from a previous outfit that she had made that she was tired of, so which she often did. And again, this same kind of circular fabric like we had in Efwa's father there. She was liking that stuff, okay? And, often the distance is a village, is that maybe smoke rising, clouds, whatever, but, it's very, very strong. So any comments or questions on this wall that we have just gone through? It's a lot to take in, yeah?
Do you know what the fabric is exactly, or for the arms that it's collage? But it has
Yeah.
a really interesting texture.
This is the tapa cloth. This is just a different kind of tapa cloth than that one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a very interesting texture, and how she used it. You notice that she moved this one this way, and then she used the face going that way. It was very intentional how she used that device. So, yeah.
The portrait of you and your sister, or your mother and your sisters, you and your sister over there, did your mother use models in her work from when she was drawing from life in any way, or was it all from her mind?
She actually frequently attended studio, and I believe, I don't know, Miss Kaplan left, but they had an artist group here, and they actually would hire models, and they would all go and sketch to keep working it. Okay. I served in that role often, especially in the earlier days in the 70s when she was really just getting going and carrying paintings around and sitting for things, and you'll kind of see my profile in some of the other work. And so she did both. Okay, so then this is another mixed media collage called Generations. Okay, and when you first look at it, you think you're seeing patterns, and then when you look at it close, you're seeing, oh, there's all these different faces, right? So the different generations. She was very much into family. She helped to put together the family tree on both sides of her parents' families, which were very, very large, and the whole concept of the clan, and that we're all part of one. And so this was her way of showing that, and that one builds on the next generation. And again, it's use of the papers, you see the fibers, there's a lot of movement, it's very kinetic. You want to start moving when you look at some of these paintings, at least I do. And then here we have Totem. We had a whole conversation about this. Mike really loved this painting. Of course, I love it too. And Steve wasn't so sure, because it's one of those things where you look at the picture of it, and the picture doesn't do the same justice as seeing the work. So we had carted over like all these possibility paintings and everything. And then when Steve saw it, he was like, oh yeah. Because it's very, very different from everything else. It's purely the tapa cloth, and the name is Totem. So when you understand that the tapa cloth is about sacred ritual and honoring, that you understand that that's what she was showing with this work. And it's going back to her abstraction roots, but she painted in and elaborated on the patterns within the tapa cloth. In the traditional Polynesian culture, there's certain patterns and configurations, just like the tattooing that you'll see that means certain things. Similar to West Africa, with kente cloth, with certain patterns connote certain things. So she developed her own kind of hieroglyphics for this, and you can sit with this for a minute and you'll see more and more every time you look at it. It's really a beautiful piece. Okay, Corn Goddess, and then this is where she used that paper. So it wasn't like your regular kind of drawing paper. It was this specialized paper, and how she would work with it to bring up different shapes and wrinkles, and embedded it with leaves, so it's kind of three-dimensional, two-dimensional, and again, that green palette. And I think she had fun with this painting as well. And here's another real favorite. This is called Here Comes the Sun. The best way to see this picture is when the sun is shining on it, because it's embedded with hundreds of little beads. You can come up close and look at this. It's got the colored, the paper and the fibers, but all of the rays, this is all cut out collage. That's a lot of work to cut it and make it fit and then accentuate it just how she wanted to shadow it a certain way. So all of these little beads, like this is a piece, she probably didn't work on anything else at the same time she was working on this one, because this took a lot of focus. And this just shimmers when it's in the right lights. I mean, it's shimmering now, And I just love it because, again, here you have, is that actually a form? Is that a figure? Is that, Mr. Sun dancing? Is it spinning? Is it, what's going on here? But it's just really very, again, when you look at it, it's coming out at you if you really study it for a minute. So any questions or comments on these pieces on this wall so far? Yeah.
I was just going to say that one of my remembrances of her when she first came here, and she was a docent here.
Right.
And she knocked everybody out because she had such knowledge and her insights as an artist, and we were all just flabbergasted how terrific she was. And she went on to have a very important role in this community.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
Not just the arts community, but the community.
Community hall, exactly. Like she was the head of art in public places.
Right.
There were many things we wished we could have tried to cram into these vitrines of a 60-year career, but it's just not possible. So we're hopeful for further exhibitions and stories, and with our archivist intern to help tell that story, including there was a book of letters of very complimentary letters from different people for her work, for her speaking, for whatever, including one from, he was a visiting, I don't know if he was a professor, but I know he was an associate director of another museum out of state, who just happened to be here and take the tour with my mother. And he wrote this incredible letter about her professorial discussion, because she had gone all the way to, she was studying her PhD in art history. She was extremely knowledgeable, and what a great presentation and engaging, blah, 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 and what a great addition to the staff. And this, she was a docent, but they didn't realize, they picked the right one that day. So thanks for sharing that, because you're absolutely right. She really helped to raise up the docent corps by improving the curriculum and the training and all of that as well. Okay, so here we have Eleanor Merritt, Remembrance. Please read the story. It's an amazing story. This is my mom, probably in the early 70s, as I remember her. She had her hair cut very short, in front of a painting that used to hang over the living room couch that she designed in our house, that has a story in itself, because on its way to an exhibition, it blew off the top of the Volkswagen. Had my father leaping around the Southern State Parkway with my mother frantic over her painting to retrieve it. And then she used her other, skills, because she was quite the seamstress as well, to repair the campus herself and hang it back up. So that painting definitely had many lives, and we hope to be able to get it restored again. But I just love that image of her and that gaze, kind of like, yeah, I'm here. I'm going to just do this. That's kind of who she was. And she really, as Nancy said, she was cherished by the community, because not only was she this amazing artist, but she helped to teach and bring along other young people. I'm going to take a minute. I see some of you here by this vitrine, and this would be a good point for me to include this in. Do take a look at this one over here. Has one of her lesson plans when she was teaching 9th grade. A picture of her sister Pauline that my mom took, because she's also an amazing photographer and also taught photography and developing and everything, because she was trained in that as well. That was in the Brooklyn College magazine, the landscape. And my Aunt Pauline had preceded my mom at the High School of Music and Art. So that was a pretty unknown thing, that very talented, creative family. My mom's father played the guitar. Her sister was a concert pianist. It was just a lot of arts, which was really kind of unusual in that time for a family of color, but they very much supported her, because my mom was very sick as a young child. She had pneumonia in the time before they had antibiotics. And you think people jumping up and down nowadays about wearing masks. Well, back then, they would come and take the kids. Polio epidemic, they would come and take the kids and put them in a quarantine hospital, which makes it fascinating to me as a physician with the current controversies that we have. My grandmother was like, no, you're not taking my baby to do that. So she was very well skilled in herbalism and other traditional health practices, and she kept my mom home. And all of these talented and wonderful older brothers and sisters would bring her books and art materials and sit with her, play music for her, et cetera, to help her to get well. And that was part of how she had such an early talent, because she'll always say she started drawing and painting since she was like 5 years old. And you see that she won many awards at Brooklyn College, including, this is the Fame School, the Fame High School of New York, right? She wins the art award at the High School of Music and Art for the graduating class, which is pretty amazing, the St. Gaudens Award. You'll also see over there on the Long Island Black Artists Association, which she was a part of in the 70s, that allowed her a place and other artists like her to exhibit their work. At that time, trying to get into MoMA or trying to get into the large, the Whitney, any of those big museums, it was only very, very select few that were permitted that. So they created their own spaces, and they had their own galleries and libraries or Tanglewood Preserve or whatever, and they just still kept showing and doing their art. Here we see the women contemporary artists. We just, in the Women's Caucus for Art, that she was a member of and very involved with. We just had one of her members were here earlier, Ms. Kaplan, who remembers her fondly, and my mom's incredible work around something called the Women of Color Slide Project, in which, now this is before computers and PDFs and all of that, that they actually had slides that they had to collect up and get sent around in a big box that I remember carrying to the post office to kind of package and promote these women's work. And because of that project and because they got it in key places, and many of those women went on to exhibit at the Smithsonian and some of the major galleries and things like that, they recognized my mom in '96. I gave that talk in Boston at the national meeting, and then they recognized her again in the Florida Women's Caucus for Art in 2005, because she was always about not only promoting her own work and her own skill, but recognizing talent and helping to bring it along. In this centerpiece, you'll see here that, again, that whole working and reworking ideas that she would go through when she was asked to help further develop the concept for Project Black Cinema, which was a black film festival that took place, and many of you might remember that. And if you see this piece over here, Tribal Memories, you see she was using her fascination with masks and things like that that she learned about in her trip to Africa. And she worked that same image over and over until she came up with these two graphical depictions for the brochures. And she allowed them to use those logos to print things to help raise money. And it actually won, and I didn't know this until later, that this won an Addy Award, an advertising award. So she was a graphic artist as well. She was also a ceramicist. This is a very small piece. She did a lot of different things, bowls. She did the whole painting of plates series. She did flowers. She did a variety of things. But this shape kind of informed this magazine cover piece that she had in Flavor magazine in 2007. And here you see her standing at one of the exhibitions where that piece was being displayed. We thought that was nice. She was for many, many years at Art Uptown, represented Art Uptown Gallery. And then this is important because this is where she was in the Deland Museum as part of, she was one of the few artists selected to be part of this special exhibit. There was also another exhibition where she was able to be with Faith Ringgold, who was somebody she really admired tremendously, and also, was just always trying to be part of a bigger story, I guess. So here we go to the end. We can have some more questions and discussion. We have here Prophet. This is in 2006. This was part of one of those first Color Matters show at Manatee State College. And I've had different people tell me, well, this kind of looks like stained glass, right? And so you see the face coming at you. But it's also kind of a tangled web. It's kind of like how she was going through at that time, what was going to be her destiny, who knew? It was going to be an interesting story. But it was still hopeful. That always would come through in her work. Things could be hard, things could be challenging, but there was always this hopeful, calm reassurance. And this is also one of her black paintings, where she would paint the canvas black and start from a black background instead of a white background and build the image up from it. She liked using that device often, and she often would use it almost in a play, an irony, like she did a piece on Angela Davis, and it was black burlap, and she painted it with white paint to create the image. So that in itself was kind of a statement, in terms of the whole Black Power movement, et cetera. This is a really, really powerful piece, okay? This is called Angel of Mercy 911. Okay, so 911, right? Twin Towers, the shards, the bones, the destruction, the anguish, but looking up and the hope. So this was in 2001, Spirit Catcher in 1990. Again, you see the evolution from like the linear, it's fluid, but yet there's a precision to it. Look at how straight, and, these lines and these forms here, using the Conte crayon, the big hands, big extended limbs, the shoulders embracing, compared to this with the wrinkled paper. It's almost kind of deteriorating. It's just embodying that sense of destruction and dismay and disarray, but rising up out of it. There's hope. And I think this is a great one to end on and to entertain further questions and comments and just, every time I see and I talk about my mom's work, I'm still If I'm sorry, but it just comes through because I grew up with this like our other siblings, these paintings, and carrying them around and helping her to name some of them, helping to remind her she already named something that, again.
Did your mom travel to New York before she painted that after the tragedy?
Well, she had been back and forth to New York many times. I mean, did she go right after 9/11? No. I mean, she didn't go right away. She was living here, but she traveled all over. But at that point, not long after that is when she became ill and her travels became restricted. So I don't believe she ever got to see the memorial or any of that stuff. That took a while for that to kind of come up.
Just a lot of images there that represent the day.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was all from we all have lots of visuals from that, the various media and the memorials that they showed afterwards. And then we had, family that were in the experience. And Quentin saw the plane. Quentin, there's another family friend back there. We were just talking how he was driving on the West Side Highway and the plane flew over as it was heading into the building. So, a lot of family people, my sister was living in Midtown. People were trying to find their way to her. And so it brings out a lot of memories for everybody. So my mom wanted to acknowledge that. And that's what she would do sometimes, is do pieces around historical moments as part of her social activism. So you've been a wonderful and attentive audience. I want to thank you.